It is done. It is finished. So let it be read. So let it be recorded and reviewed. I'm back. I've finally finished the Ender saga, and I have groomed myself. Not like that. It's just a haircut, guys. I finally finished the Ender saga. I read Children of the Mind, and it was quite the journey. So let us discuss.
Oh, he's technically Mexican and 3/4 American, but for 3 generations he's got that nationality. Great-great-grandpa headed south, whose kids had kids then turned around. It's not what the show's about, but it's why he's Mexican technically. It helps that he was raised in New Mexico, lived in Guadalajara for 2 years, speaks fluent Spanish with a bachelor's degree in language, and makes taquito.
As I've said previously, I love Ender's Game. It was my favorite book growing up. It was my childhood computer password. I honestly cannot tell you how many times I've read the book. The first time I read it, I was in grade school, and I reread it so many times in my youth. I really connected with the story back then because it was an awesome story with a great twist, and also I was bullied profusely as a child for my weight and religion, actually. Yeah, I got beaten up for being a Christian. So anyway, like a good Christian boy, I always turned the other cheek and never tried not to fight back. But I had a lot of pent-up resentment towards bullies, so it was nice to read Ender's Game. The book where he inadvertently unalives his bullies. Obviously, I would never do something like that, in real life, unless it was like a self-defense type situation. But I really liked Ender's Game. That's the point of the story. We've digressed just a little bit. I love the book so much. I reread it and reread it and reread it. And I even read Ender's Shadow a couple times too, because it was the same cool story but from a different perspective. And that was it. I never moved on to the other books, which was a very silly decision. But now, almost 20 years later, I've gotten around to reading the sequels, and oh boy, they are fantastic. I've talked about how Speaker for the Dead was beautiful and amazing, and it made Ender's Game look bad by comparison. And then I talked about how Xenocide made Speaker for the Dead look bad by comparison. And now I've finished the quadrilogy. I know there are technically more books, but these were the original 4. I will probably get around to reading Ender in Exile and The Last Shadow, but I'm told I need to finish reading the Shadow series first, for those to be fully appreciated. So I'll get to those eventually, but not anytime soon. I need a break from. I need an Orson Scott Card break for a little bit. I need to get back to my true love, which is fantasy. I love sci-fi, but I like fantasy more. Anyways, Children of the Mind is the perfect bow for the series. I don't think it's the most important book. I think Speaker for the Dead and Xenocide are incredibly important, and aside from being incredibly interesting sci-fis, they also have an excellent message, and the real story behind those books is about the human condition and overcoming racial prejudices and finding common ground with your enemies and alien species and learning to coexist. It's like those bumper stickers, but not stupid. So I think Speaker for the Dead and Xenocide are incredibly important books and like should be read in school. I think you can get a whole lot more meaning out of reading these sci-fi books than you can by reading a lot of the books that I was forced to read in school. Also, it would be like more approachable to young boys who like aliens. It's you could literally trick kids into reading about philosophy by telling them it's a cool sci-fi book. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I feel like people would learn a whole lot more if you tricked them into reading awesome books that incidentally have incredible meaning behind them. Not to say that there's no purpose for the classics. Like, yeah, I get the concept behind The Great Gatsby. It's a fine book, but this sci-fi series has so much more to say. Children of the Mind, however, has a little bit less to say philosophically and and emotionally, but it has a lot to experiment with in the sci-fi realm. This book mostly focuses on tying up all the plot threads that were left dangling throughout the rest of the series, and it does a fantastic job of exploring the sci-fi concepts that have been introduced in these books and bringing those to a natural, very satisfying conclusion. And it really is a wonderful book, and it is the perfect bookend to the series. So I enjoyed it immensely, but it's probably not as important to read as the other books in the series. Obviously, once you've read the other books, you will want to read the ending, and that's what this book does. It does it very well. There were lots of twists and turns, and I really liked the sci-fi discussion that this book presents. It's fascinating and really cool. It's also very refreshing and exactly what you need to read after you've suffered through the other books, because while I love them, they were very emotionally taxing.
Emotional damage!
And sometimes incredibly disturbing and heartbreaking.
I can't take it. I can't take it.
And so after those books have torn your soul apart, this book does a pretty good job of patching you back together.
That'll do, Pig. That'll do.
It's a great ending to the series, and I really enjoyed it. It also ties up pretty much everything really well. There is only one plot thread left dangling. It is a pretty big plot thread. Like, there's a pretty big teaser at the end of the book, but it's kind of one of those, like, open-ended teasers, like the ending of the first Matrix movie, where you're like, oh, wow, there could be some really interesting things that happen later, and it's kind of better if it's left ambiguous in your mind, because if it's explored, then you get the Matrix sequels, which were, if nothing else, disappointing. But what's nice is he does explore that final plot thread in the other books that have come out recently, but it's not really important to the main story that was supposed to be told here anyway. It's just kind of a bonus if you want to keep going. So that's it. It does a very good job of tying up the story, and it's a wonderful story. I'm so glad that I read it. It's really eye-opening and makes you think about the world differently. And it's a wonderful story and a wonderful message. And what's crazy is I'm kind of grateful that I waited 20 years to read it. Because while I connected to Ender's Game a bunch when I was a kid, I don't think I would have connected to the sequels as much, because there's not as much action in them. They're not as exciting, but they're way more important. And now, coming back as a father, having children, having a wife, these books really hit differently. They are very emotional. I definitely wouldn't have connected to them in the same way as a kid. That's it. So glad I read the series. I'll get to the other books eventually, but reading sci-fi is a little bit taxing on one's mental fortitude. So now I want to go read about dragons and swords and magic and princesses. I gotta give my psyche a little bit of time to recover before I get into more heavy stuff. And that's it. That's the review. I hope you enjoyed the journey. Bye!